Welcome into Sportsmemo's Betting Podcast. It's college football edition. We're bringing Rob Veno in, and we're talking the Big 12. We're going to be talking the top 5 teams in terms of alphabetical order in the Big 12, starting with Baylor, ending with Oklahoma. Next week we'll hit the other 5 teams in the Big 12 conference. But without further ado, Rob Veno, welcome into the podcast. How you doing today?
I am doing great today, Drew. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, Robbie. Anytime we're talking college football, it puts a little pep in my step, not to mention it is a Friday today. Happy Friday out there. Make sure to check out sportsmemo.com. For all your betting needs, we got big plays up and available on the Major League Baseball slate. Also, CFL in full force with McGinnis. I believe he's out to a 4-0 start in CFL. That's a beatable market up there north of the border, so check that out as well. But, Robbie, we got college football as the main topic today, and we'll start off at the top here, alphabetical order, the B school, Baylor. The Baylor Bears, Matt Rule in his third year. We know what that means. Third year, fourth year head coaches tend to be bet-ons. Also, if they're not doing that well, they tend to be on the hot seat as well. Quarterback Charlie Brewer, I'll tell you, Robbie, I can't believe this guy's still in college. It seems like he's been around forever, man. A couple different schools here. But overall, what's your view here on the team in Waco, Texas this year?
Yeah, well, out of the 5 we'll talk about today, Drew, it's the one team that's got the coaching stability. Matt Rule's, offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators remain the same here as they did last year. The 2 head guys, OC and DC, have been here all 3 years with him. Glenn Thomas, the co-offensive coordinator, second year in the job. But it's a pretty stable thing. Matt Rule, we remember where this program came from. Brought it from ashes to a bowl game last year, and certainly they're looking forward to. I read some projections which could be obviously slanted or biased toward pro Baylor because they were written by Baylor beat writers, but some of these guys are looking for 9 wins on this schedule, Drew. That's a very lofty goal for the Baylor Bears, but still, last year 7-6 straight up, 7-6 against the spread, made extreme progress, got themselves, as I mentioned, to a bowl game against Vandy, win that one 45-38. Springboard into this season, Charlie Brewer, you mentioned his name. He's one of, I guess I'll say, top 5 quarterbacks as personal favorite. Top 5 quarterback in college football. Just love everything he does there, from the pocket passing ability to the ability to make plays outside the pocket, and then when necessary, scramble and make yardage on broken plays. So I think Charlie Brewer certainly is in for a big year, and consider the fact that he's got major wide receiver talent back. Baylor, and they showed it in the Vanderbilt game last year in the bowl game, how good these wide receivers can be when fully healthy. But when you have Denzel Mims and Chris Platt and now Tyquan Thornton, who actually led the team in receiving per catch last year, 17.7 per catch, that trio, Drew, is as good as it gets inside the Big 12, and they've got a quarterback that can get them the ball. The biggest concerns for this team, as would be any team that's coming from a roster that was depth shy after all the trouble that they went through and now expanding out again, it's the offensive and defensive line. Last year, across the offensive line, especially when it came to pass protection, they got Charlie Brewer hit a little bit. 32 times he went down in only 9 Big 12 games. That's 3.5, nearly 4 sacks, close to 4 sacks per game. You can't have that from your offensive line. And the fact that they averaged about 4.4 per carry going out of a spread offense. I know Baylor is looking to improve that ground game this year. That was a major focus of spring practice. So we worry a little bit about the offensive line. In my estimation, it probably makes strides this year. The defensive line, question marks as well, especially against the run. Vanderbilt absolutely tortured this team in the bowl game last year, running the football, put up huge numbers, 284 yards, 6.2 per carry, a couple of big runs in that game. Anybody who remembers watching that game, it was just big play, passing-wise out of Baylor, big play, running-wise out of Vandy, back and forth they went. So they've got to shore up the defensive front four, certainly on this team. But Matt Rule is a defensive coordinator by nature, and Phil Snow, I'll never forget the quote he had last year heading into year 2, Drew, where he said everywhere they've been together, and even when he wasn't with Matt Rule, in his system, the team has shown extreme progress second and third year on the defensive side. He said it takes a while to grasp his system, but when they do, they become really good. And if you just look back at how Temple incrementally progressed into being probably the best defense in the AAC when Rule and Snow left that program, Baylor's not going to be the best defensive program in the Big 12, but they'll probably make strides to being better this year. We're talking about a 76 point spread team last year. I don't know that they'll get as overlooked, let's say, as they were last season, but certainly they have the potential with this schedule to cover maybe 7 games. Again, I can see 7 winnables straight up, which puts them in a bowl game. I think that it's probably a team that you have to keep your eye on right now, especially with what's going on in the rest of the Big 12 with so many coaching overhauls. Maybe Baylor this year gets a step up on the programs like Kansas, Kansas State, West Virginia, who, like I say, are going through huge system overhauls.
And Robbie, there with the Baylor breakdown here, 7-6 last year in conference, 4-5 in the Big 12 against the number. It went 6-6, also 7-6 towards the over. Kind of, hearing some rumblings there of maybe being an over team, but it looks like they were kind of priced correctly as far as a total standpoint, at least last year goes. So even if there is lofty totals with Baylor, might not for sure be an over team, so to speak. But let's move down the line here, Robbie. We got Iowa State up next, the Cyclones in Ames, Iowa. Matt Campbell in his 4th year here. Iowa State went 8-5 last year straight up, 6-3 in conference. ATS record just 6-7 and 4-8, trended big time towards the under here, Robbie. And Matt Campbell, as we know, he came over from Toledo. They've had a nice kind of trajectory here with their program. He's a good coach. In 14, they went 2-10, and 15, 3-9. Again in 16, 3-9, and then 17 made that jump up to 8-5 and followed it up again last year, 8-5. So it will be interesting if they can really improve on what they've been doing. Quarterback position is always a key here, but with Iowa State, I feel that they have a really good coach, fundamentally sound here, Robbie. How do you view the Cyclones this upcoming year?
Yeah, their biggest problem, Drew, is usually not a problem that Iowa State has, and that is the losses that they had on the offensive side of the football to the NFL. Just take a look at the running back position where they lose David Montgomery. Look at the wide receiver position where they lose Hakeem Butler. Both of those guys now going to be playing on Sundays in the NFL. Those two combined last year for 2,700 yards and 22 touchdowns. It's tough to replace when you're Iowa State. So right now, as they went through the spring, head coach Matt Campbell basically said that the running back decision won't be made until the very end of fall camp. And that's not because they can't find anybody. It's because they have viable running backs who can step in. They might not be David Montgomery, but they're going to have about a 4-man stable of backs there. And it looks like the competition is so heated, that's why it'll take till the end of fall practice to come up with a number one. But they should be all right in that area. It's the receiving area where they'll probably be hurt. They cannot, at least at the end of spring, and I always say that coming out of the spring game, coaching staffs generally paint all the positives, and you hear a lot of coach speak to the good with these teams. But Iowa State a little bit honest here, saying that they're in search of an outside wide receiver. When you lose, once again, Butler and Alan Lazard, 2 guys that have been in that program for a while, and 2 home run threats, pretty big guys. It's difficult. They don't have the size right now on hand that they had in those 2 wide receivers, and they're reaching for somebody to be that big play number one, and they're going to need it, because if teams are allowed to stack the box against Iowa State and they can't move it through the air, that's going to be troublesome. The good note is that last year, due to attrition, they kept going through quarterback after quarterback because of injury, and they finally land on Brock Purdy, who I think was 3rd team last year when he got the starting assignment middle of the season, but he was tremendous. 66.4% completions, QB efficiency number of 169.9, which is extremely good. So you've got a quarterback that can certainly find receivers. You've got a quarterback that can run the football. And whether the passing game, Drew, has to be routed through tight ends or maybe slot receivers and not so much the outside receivers. Matt Campbell was a tight end and a tight ends coach, so he knows that position. And maybe that's where they go for their passing yards this year. We'll see. The offense doesn't figure to be any different, even though there's a new, and I use new in name only, coordinator in town. They bring back offensive coordinator Tom Manning this year. Matt Campbell is going to relinquish the offensive coordinator duties. Manning was the offensive coordinator for this team in 2016 and 2017. Last year he went to the NFL, coached with the Indianapolis Colts, but he's right back. So there's no system change. These guys know the personnel on hand. Somehow they'll have to make the passing game work, but I think with Purdy as your quarterback, especially beginning of the year, as handicappers and bettors, we look for teams that have returning starting QBs, and especially good ones, those first couple of weeks of the year, because it makes a difference. I think Purdy's definitely a difference maker. There'll be no question on the defensive side. I don't, each year, as the years go by with Campbell running this program now, I question the defense less and less. You can just assume, put it down on paper, that they're going to be a very, very good defense. Last year, this team trended under 3-8-2, 3 overs, 8 unders, 2 pushes, because the defense was so good, and because somehow, some way, in the Big 12, they're able to limit opposing teams' total plays in a league where everybody's up tempo, in a league where everybody wants to run 80 plays plus per game. Iowa State only allowed 69 total plays per game against them last year. And when you slow teams down, you lower the score. Thus, Iowa State, a pretty good under team last year, certainly profitable, extremely profitable in that area. We'll get into this a little bit more tomorrow because I want to talk about it with a coaching change, next week when we do Big 12 football, the second half of this league. I want to talk about a coaching change, but they've sort of developed a defense in the Big 12, which they refer to as tight front, specifically designed to defend spread offenses, and it's really popping up all over the place in the Big 12, and Iowa State was really the innovator here. So they were first to the table to say, hey, listen, we can't give up 50 points per game like everybody else is in this league. They figured out a way. It's a copycat sport like any other sport, and we see a lot of that right now. So their defense ahead of the curve, like them. I don't know why you wouldn't continue to play this team under, Drew, considering the fact that the passing game might be less explosive. We know the defense is going to keep opponents harnessed. When you look through their closing totals last year, they're not high totals. They're basically mid-run totals, but still they were able to stay under 8 times in 13 games. So I think that's probably one way you would look at Iowa State. They're going to be priced really well because Iowa State's no secret anymore. So how we play them against the spread is up in the air. But I still think they're an under team because of the personnel on the field here and because of the style that they play.
Guys, we're talking with Rob Veno, breaking down the Big 12, the top 5 teams in terms of alphabetical order this week, the bottom 5 teams in terms of alphabetical order next week's podcast. We got the podcast coupon code CFBPOD, that's CFBPOD, at checkout for $300 off Robbie Veno or myself, Drew Martin's full season college football package or the full season NFL and college football package. Both of those up and available at sportsmemo.com, and coupon code CFBPOD at checkout will take $300 off, so huge savings there. We'll keep that active for a little bit here. But Robbie, next team up in the Big 12, we got the Kansas Jayhawks from Lawrence, Kansas, and I'll tell you, Robbie, I don't know if I've ever been as excited as I am now to talk about Kansas football in my whole life, and the reason being Les Miles. The Mad Hatter takes over here in Lawrence, Kansas. First year here, 17th overall. And, as far as last year goes with Kansas, I'm kind of not really surprised, but, I mean, Beatty gets shown the door here after a 3-9 2018 campaign. But he matched the season wins of the 2 previous years with those 3 wins. So I feel like they were trending up in Kansas, but nonetheless, he loses his job. Les Miles comes in, and Les Miles, these situations, as far as guys in the latter half of their career coming in, is he just accepting a paycheck, in your opinion, and 3 years Kansas will be doing this again? Or do you think that he hits the recruiting trail hard in Kansas within 2, 3, 4 years is going bowling? Which side are you on, Robbie?
This is an intriguing team for sure, Drew, and I don't know which side I'm on yet, but I would probably have to say arrow up with Kansas. It might not show up in year one. It's a complete offensive and defensive system overhaul. I'd be positive that the way the offense looks like it's heading upward, as long as he stays away and doesn't take the reins out of the offensive coordinators and Dearman's hands, I think that Kansas will be fine offensively. They'll recruit to the defense and start to make their way upwards. I don't know what it means as far as point spread or totals are concerned this year. We'll have to have a couple of games to watch and see, and then maybe we can just counter-punch to what we see as results first couple of weeks.
Yeah, Kansas will be an interesting team this year, Robbie. Les Miles in himself will bring some fanfare. It'll be interesting to see if he's eating grass and the Mad Hatter stuff and all that. But I think that he should be able to recruit well and, maybe go into the Southeast, grab some kids, bring them up to Kansas, whatever it may be. But I would look for Kansas to possibly make a bowl game here in the next 3 or 4 years. It could be heading upwards in Lawrence, Kansas. We got, Robbie? 2 more teams left here in the Big 12, going with another school here. Both Kansas schools with first-year head coaches. Chris Kleinman, the former head coach for the North Dakota State team, the FCS powerhouse, takes the Kansas State job. This is an interesting job as well because heavily with JUCO recruits here in Kansas State. But overall, they've put a heck of a program together. 9-4 in 16, 8-5 in 17, and then fell off a little bit last year, just at 5-7, missing a bowl game. 4-8 under trender, so just 4 overs, 8 unders, and ATS 7-5. Nonetheless, they didn't go bowling. But what are you thinking here for the Wildcats from Manhattan, Kansas, Robbie?
Yeah, I think this one, we may not see as much difference in Kansas State as we'll see in Kansas, just due to the fact that while Kansas is going to open up, as we mentioned, to that RPO system, a wide open offensive style, when you get a head coach from North Dakota State, and in this case, Chris Kleinman, you know what you're going to get. You're getting a pro-style, traditional offense, a team that last year, and remember, Kleinman brought his staff with him to this place, especially on the offensive side. Courtney Messingham, the offensive coordinator, they ran the ball 60% of the time last year. They go from under center, they run the football, they play action off of that. The only difference between what Bill Snyder was doing, because this offense that I'm describing sounds a lot like what Kansas State was, although Kansas State probably had a little more quarterback run in their system. There's more motions and pre-snap stuff to disguise things. They want to confuse you in looking at Messingham's background. They want to confuse you a little bit. They want to throw on obvious rundowns. They want to run on obvious throwdowns, stuff like that. But it's a pro-style offense, and it's a slow-paced offense, which is exactly what Kansas State was, which is exactly why they trend towards the under year after year, as you described. I don't see much of a difference there. On the defensive side, with Scotty Hazelton taking over, he's a proponent of those bend but don't break type defenses, Drew. They'd rather have you go 15 plays and not allow any big ones than allow a touchdown in 3 plays. So it's a little more of that cerebral type. And they want to attack, as any defense does. They want to attack and run to the football, and that's what they were doing during the spring. But again, this is a team that maybe even more so than Iowa State would trend towards the under because the offense is going to be slow-paced, the defense is going to make you grind it out, and thus there's going to be less plays in a game. And I'm really looking at this as an under. If you want to use a guideline of what to look at as to how K-State will look. Just look at Craig Bowl in Wyoming, and look at what Wyoming's done since Craig Bowl took over. Remember, Kleiman coached under Bowl. It's the same exact thing that they did at North Dakota State when Bowl was head coach, when Kleiman was head coach. So you're not going to see any difference there. Schedule-wise, for K-State, if we look at them as a potential bowl team, they're non-conference. The first two aren't bad, should be wins, Nicholls State and Bowling Green, but then going away to play Mississippi State, they'll probably get it handed to them. And then to go through the rigors of the conference schedule here and have their last bye week, Drew, on October 12th, which means from October 12th on, Kansas State's going to play 7 consecutive Big 12 games. And if any attrition starts to set in, by the end of the year, let's say the last 2-3 games, K-State could be a team that's just fatigued and beaten up and perhaps getting whacked by teams like West Virginia and Texas Tech, who are also undergoing coaching changes and maybe are on down years, but might get the benefit of the doubt of playing K-State late just because of the way the schedule works out here. So I don't see a lot of good for K-State. I don't see a lot of change in what they've been in Manhattan to what they are now. But the biggest difference is going to be Bill Schneider to Chris Kleiman. Again, reports out of spring, the kids are taken to the systems. Everybody's excited. That seems to be a common theme every single year when you go through coaching changes. But I don't know that it represents any more in the win column this year. I don't know that it represents any more in the point spread covering category. But I do think that they're an under team for sure. I think you can take K-State and play them under in most instances and be successful.
All right, Robbie. Guys, thanks for tuning in. We got one team left. We're sorry for the technical difficulties. Next week it will be fixed. On Monday we'll have Teddy Covers in breaking down the MLB card. So hopefully everybody has a good weekend and tunes into that. But one more team here, the Oklahoma Sooners. Before we get into it, just a reminder, the coupon code is CFBPOD, CFBPOD at checkout for full season college football NFL packages for $300 off. CFB POD at checkout. CFB Pod is the coupon code. We got Oklahoma Sooners up next, Robbie. Pretty. As far as programs go, there aren't many that have had a better recent past here than Oklahoma. Since 2015, have not had less than 11 wins in any season. Lincoln Riley just takes over and has done a great job himself. They made it all the way to the Orange Bowl, the semifinals, and got beat by Alabama. They did cover, and it was a game I was at in the Orange Bowl. It was a fun one, but they lose another Heisman Trophy winner, another first pick of the draft at the quarterback position, and then they bring in a quarterback who's already won a national championship, and Jalen Hurts making the transfer over from Alabama. This is an interesting handicap in itself this year, Robbie, handicapping the Oklahoma Sooners. 12-2 last year, 9-1 in conference. ATS, though, just 6-7-1, obviously depending what your closing number you were betting on Oklahoma, and 11-3 over trenders here. If you were betting Oklahoma Sooners over the total, you made some serious cash last year. Remember the Red River shootout, I believe. I don't think that's too offensive to still call it a shootout against Texas. They did lose that one. Came back to beat them in the Big 12 title game, and then went on to the playoffs and lost to Alabama in the Orange Bowl, but did cover that game, Robbie. What are you thinking for this upcoming year here with the Oklahoma Sooners?
Well, I can tell you what they're thinking, Drew, and what they're thinking is the only thing eluding them right now is a national championship, and the only way to get that national championship is to improve their defense. They bring in a new defensive coordinator. Alex Grinch comes over from Ohio State. They're going to shift the entire system here and see if they can't improve that defense enough. I mean, take a look at their last 6 games of the season. They allowed 40 points or more in 5 of those 6 games. And when you were talking about a team that trends towards the over, obviously they're high-priced where totals are concerned because of their offense, but their defense helped just as much as the offense last year. Over the course of their last 6 games, totals read 97, 95, 95, 115, 66, and 79. So you can see that defense is a real problem here. They're going to switch to a nickel-based defense, which obviously when you're playing in a pass-oriented or spread-oriented conference, you have to be able to defend all over the field. So they're going to look to add speed onto the field here under Grinch. I would say, Drew, right off the bat, and maybe because their results were so bad on the defensive side of the football, that I'd be inclined to say that they're going to improve defensively. But you look back at the troubles that Ohio State had defensively last year until they finally got it right about midway through. And Ohio State was no great shakes defensively, even though they're putting all this talent in the NFL. Their numbers defensively weren't great. So maybe it's going to take some time for Oklahoma to adapt to Grinch's system. I know the concern here is that they're afraid moving to this system of big plays. And again, I think back to Ohio State, which was victimized by big plays for half to two-thirds of the season in their games. And even if you go back 2 years, same deal with Ohio State. So I could see this team still giving up a lot of points. Certainly they're going to score a ton of points. Jalen Hurts gets to step in, as you mentioned, and take over Lincoln Riley's offense. He'll put up huge numbers. I don't know that he'll be the number one pick overall, but maybe a Heisman season is in the waiting for him as well. Same type of team, Drew. I don't see a lot of difference here. Certainly odds makers are caught on to them. They price them heavily as far as point spread is concerned. They price them in the stratosphere as far as totals are concerned. But maybe still you can win betting over with this team because, as I mentioned, I don't know that they're going to be significantly better on the defensive end, despite the change in system and despite the new defensive coordinator. Right now, when he came in, just to let you know what Oklahoma's thinking, they don't feel like they have the right personnel to play this system this year. They have to recruit to it, much like a lot of these other teams in the conference have to recruit to their system changes. So Oklahoma getting better on defense is no guarantee here.
Robbie, good breakdown as always. We'll have you on next week breaking down the other half of the Big 12 conferences. Guys, reach out to Robbie Veno on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports, myself at Drew Martin Betts. Let us know what you want to hear next. Any questions you got, handicapping questions, college football questions, anything like that. Feel free to shoot them over. Best of luck with your bets this weekend. Have a fun, safe weekend, and we'll talk to you on Monday.